Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Three main characters in our little drama. Rachel Levin, LympheDIVAS, and me. In 2004, my wife Judy and I had retired, my wife Judy and I were living in Philadelphia. And our daughter Rachel was also living in Philadelphia. Rachel was a remarkable person. She had graduated with a bachelor's in English from the University of California at Berkeley and gone on to win a master's degree in education at Northwestern University. She taught for about 4 years and then reinvented herself as a graphic designer. And she went on to work for 3 years at the Philadelphia Museum of Fine Arts. And following that, she reinvented herself as an entrepreneur in a company called Sourthern, where she did documentaries and for businesses, for families, and most recently for not-for-profit organizations. And here she is posing with Alec Baldwin at the gala for the Wilmington Theater Festival, which she had created a documentary of the Wilmington Theater Festival history. She was also an avid triathlete, rock climber, and 2004 was a great year for Rachel. She met the man that was to become her husband, and here they are at their wedding in the Berkshires in 2007. And here we are, better times, at the New York Macworld Expo. Our son Josh, and Rachel and me. And then the screen goes black, and our lives go black. Rachel was diagnosed with triple negative stage 3 breast cancer. She underwent an accelerated section, an armpit, radiation to that area, chemotherapy. And by 2006, that was done, but she developed swelling in her arm, which is diagnosed as lymphedema, a very common side effect of breast cancer treatment caused by the actual local treatment to the armpit. Well, she then went and saw her physiatrist, who recommended a device, a compression sleeve for her hand and her wrist and arm. This causes compression of the hand, greater in the hand and then in the wrist, and decreasing pressure all the way up the arm. It's a medical device. It looked like a tube made of the same material as a bandage. It was hot, heavy, coarse, impervious to moisture, beige and ugly, and she detested it. And she went to her doctor and she said, "Isn't there any other alternatives? This is awful. I'm 34 years old and I don't want this on my arm indefinitely." And she said, "Well, the industry of compression is dominated by large multinational companies, mainly based in Switzerland and Germany, and this is what they've made for the past 50 years, and that's what they make." And she then asked the question, why can't it be like the garments I wear when I compete as a triathlete? They're lightweight, they're thin, they're moisture-wicking, they whip moisture away from the skin, and they're beautiful. And her doctor said, well, there's actually no reason why not. Why don't you do it? And with that, LympheDIVAS, medically correct fashion, was born. Rachel then went to a couple of partners, and these partners, one was also a young breast cancer survivor with lymphedema, and the other was a senior at the Drexel University Fashion Design School. And they immediately applied to the Drexel Business School Business Plan Contest, and lo and behold, for the first time, they began to arrive and be sold, and they were in colors. And women grabbed them up because they didn't look medical. And they could go out in public. They were decent to wear. About 6 or 8 months later, Rachel was sitting at her desk, and her partners came into the room, and they were tearful and angry and upset, and they said, look, and they pointed to an advertisement. One of these large multinational companies was offering colored sleeves, and they said, they're going to put us out of business. And please don't be my daughter. She smiled and she said, well, I went into this business to give women options. And if we aren't the ones that give them the options, at least they're going to have them. But Rachel had another card on her sleeve. She had envisioned prints on her sleeve. And she had been investigating. And she found that material, nylon, and spandex can sometimes take up a process called dye sublimation, which is paper printed with a pattern, which in special inks, pressed up against the garment, and under heat and pressure, transfer the pattern to the garment. Unfortunately, most people told her that if you wanted to get a decent print, you had to make the temperature so high that you would destroy the spandex. Well, Rachel was undeterred. She found a company in Galveston, Texas, that in fact was printing on nylon and spandex for non-medical socks. And so she called up Celeste Stein, the American princess in Galveston, Texas, and said, how do you do this? And she ended up going down there, and they established some parameters for how we would print on lymphedema sleeves. And within a few months, she had made a deal with Celeste Stein, and lymphedivas was offering prints on their medical devices. So they also, after that, included a gauntlet with the sleeve which extended the pressure to the hand. Things were going fairly well, except by mid-2007, Rachel had a recurrence of her breast cancer. And she continued on, even though she was failing, and by the end of the year, in December, Rachel called me into her bedroom, and she said this, Dad, lymphedema is the most important thing I've ever done in my life, and I don't want to see it die with me. I want you to promise me to take on lymphedema and try to make it a success. Well, I very rarely said no to my daughter, and this certainly wasn't going to be the exception. So I did agree, although something in my head said, you know, I'm 67 years old, I've retired. Maybe this isn't such a great idea. However, I decided to say yes. And after she died, we learned a few more things about Rachel. We learned that she was a great friend. 250 people showed up at her funeral. We met some young women who had gone into teaching as a result of having her as a teacher. 2 of her friends named her children after her. And it was clear that we weren't the only people that thought Rachel was a very special person. But in February of that year, I was now 67 years old and in charge of a startup organization. And I found 2 things. I found that they hadn't balanced their checkbook since the start of the organization. That was 18 months. I also got a call from the company that had developed the products, and they were supplying it, but they said, we're a developer, we're not a mill, and we're not going to do that anymore. You'll have to find a mill. We also heard from the website developer. He was no longer going to support the website. And I thought, hey, this was not a good idea. So the first thing was to try to find someone that was going to make the product. We had to find a mill. And as you may realize, most of the textile industry, meaning left the country a long time ago. But Rachel had gone to a 2 places in North Carolina that had in fact submitted samples. And we picked the best sample, the one that looked most likely to provide the product that we wanted. And Jason Troxel, her husband, myself, and the engineer who had developed the product went down to visit the mill in Asheville, North Carolina. And everything went well and then a couple hours after we're there, the owner appears and he said, we've decided we're not going to deal with small companies anymore. And the answer is no. And we said, that could mean we no longer are in business because we have no product. And boy, maybe this whole thing really was not a good idea. So we started back, very quiet, on the way from Asheville, North Carolina. We were headed to Raleigh, Durham. And I get on the phone and I try to call the other mill. And Larry, unfortunately, is having lunch with his father, and he can't be reached. And we have to decide by the time we get to Interstate 85 whether we're going to turn. Here, a few months later, I'm standing with the machine that knitted our first products at that mill. And so we were in business. We had a mill. Problems were getting solved. And here's the next story. So we're doing fine. Except when we get to the point by the next year, we're doing okay. However, we're losing $5,000 a month. This is all coming from my retirement funds. And again, the idea occurred to me, what? It's not a good idea. However, there was a meeting coming up between the Living Beyond Breast Cancer Group and the Young Survivors Coalition. There's going to be some 500 breast cancer survivors. And I approached the CEOs of both organizations and I said, look, we'll develop a sleeve which have your logos on it, and we'll put it on the website for the women coming to the meeting. You're supposed to wear a compression sleeve when you travel by air, if you're having lymphedema or you're at risk. And they agreed. And so I turned to Anna, who was our graphic designer, and I said, do you think you could design a sleeve that would do this and that we could sell? And Anna said, well, I've done graphic design, I've never done textile design, and I really haven't done fashion, so this is a stretch for me, pardon the pun. But she said, I will try. And Anna came up with this sleeve, and it turned out to be the most popular sleeve that we had that year, and in the succeeding 3 or 4 years. And it moved us from in the red to in the black, which we have been ever since. So we have come through that problem, but we get to 2010, and I realized that I'm going to be 70 that year, that I'm working 50 hours a week, and I can't sustain that kind of effort. And I need an exit strategy. Luckily, we had a call from a venture capitalist who said, come down. We went down to Atlanta, we met with these people, and they gave us a good offer, and it looked really great. And then we got back, and about a month and a half later, we got a letter of intent, which bore no relation to what we had agreed on a month and a half before. Other people may have had this kind of experience. And so we called and said, well, what's the problem here in the DC? Said, well, there must have been a miscommunication. And so we haven't communicated with those people again. But my son, or our son, Josh, chimes in. I've always wanted to do something for my sister's legacy, and I'll take this over. I'll be your exit strategy. And so he did, but he had one provision. He was living in Brooklyn working for an industrial design company in Manhattan, and he said, I just got engaged, and I don't want to bring these kids up, and I will have, and he hasn't, but I don't want to bring these kids that I have in New York, I wanted to live in the Berkshires, and I always wanted to live in the Berkshires, but I had no idea what I would do. Now I know. I'm going to move from LympheDIVAS to the Berkshires. And so we did. And 4 years ago, we moved into 7 North, into 3,400 square feet. I did say that this was going to be really hard. We have employees that are trained. It's going to be expensive. Maybe it's not a good idea. But he was insistent. And it turned out Anna, our designer, moved with us. And I'm not really sure whether she moved because she really liked working for us, or whether the weather in the Berkshires was more like what she remembered growing up in Novosibirsk, Siberia. She really did enjoy last month's winter, by the way. So we now have 12 employees. We have 2 wide format printers that print our patterns. We have only our own designs. We have another designer working called Jill, who produces our design. And we have 2 now heavy-duty pneumatic controlled presses, and we are turning out a few more styles. In fact, we have quite a few more styles. We have many, we have 100 styles for everybody's fashion needs, and we have gone on to do this, but when we got to the end, we realized we still only have a gauntlet, and our customers are saying we really have to offer gloves because many women have swelling in their fingers. And gloves have always been a problem for us because gloves have seams, if you notice. They either have a seam on either side or 4 seams, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and you can't print on a seam. So we had to find a seamless compression glove, which really didn't exist. And there are only 2 companies in the world that make machines that will produce a whole garment, a seamless glove. And we found one, and eventually went on to develop it. At first, we couldn't find anybody to work on this, and eventually we decided we had to finish the development in-house and had to train a person in-house to run this machine. And Benita didn't start until she got her first education from Bonnie Burton of Colorful Stitches, who brought her a manual knitting machine to teach her some of the basics. And I think this represents something that we have in the Berkshires, that we have people that really like to help businesses and help each other. And it's been really important for us generally. So, what do we have? We have now a seamless compression glove. This is modeled by our Chief of Operations, Leslie Hellman. Leslie, you really can't see it. Could you just move around a little bit? You have to see it, turn it around. Oh, absolutely no seams whatsoever. That's right. Wouldn't this be actually one of the prettiest medical devices that you've ever seen? Absolutely. So, we have gone on. We have sold 34,000 pieces over the past 12 months. We have a website which had 50,000 hits over the past 6 months, every country in the world. We have 12 employees, and that's one measure of success. But I think most of our employees would agree that there's a more important measure of success. On August 26th, that was Rachel's birthday. We had a Rachel's birthday sale. And we climbed Monument Mountain, which was one of Rachel's favorite hikes in the Berkshires. And they took a picture. We got someone to take a picture. That's Josh and his wife Pam, and Judy and me, and the black one is Bo and Mason. And after the picture was taken, Josh checked his email. This is true. And this is what he found in the email. And it says, "If Rachel were alive, I would thank her for taking her lymphedema into a pleasant experience for the rest of us who wear her colorful sleeves. It also gives me the opportunity to explain to people the treatment as I see them staring at my arm, probably wondering why a woman of my age is wearing a tattoo or something. Sadly, Rachel is no longer on earth. I'd like to think that she hears me. Every day, I put on her sleeve and I say a prayer for her, a cure for breast cancer, and more research in the disease